Chapter 1 Mist of Shadows. Early morning rays of sun peek through Freya's open window, the ivory curtains stirring from the cool breeze of dawn. Her eyes blink open, already wishing she could stay in bed just a little longer. She used to love watching the morning sun shift from a ruby haze to the golden light. But now, the bright sun serves as a reminder of her duties for the day. She sinks back into her airy sheets, dragging them over her eyes to block the growing rays. Freya's particularly chunky cat, Flora, hops onto her bed and nestles into the crook of Freya's elbow. After a few moments, Flora starts pawing at the sheet covering Freya's face. Freya gets the hint. It's time to wake up. Quickly, Freya pulls back the sheets and makes a silly face at Flora. She rolls out of bed and picks up the black and white speckled cat, who is now purring at her in one swift motion. She gives her a few strokes as she flits around her apartment, watering the various plants that engulf her small living space. Feeling Flora's restlessness in her arms, Freya starts to set her down and Flora leaps out of her hands, landing gracefully on the floor. Her tail flickers as Freya watches her go outside by way of the open window. What Flora spends all day doing she doesn't know. Just that she always arrives back by the time Freya gets home. Pulling on her green shirt and brown slacks, Freya pins her dark curls behind her head. She gives one last look to her small apartment, the one window that she leaves cracked for Flora, her small bed, and the even smaller kitchen with one wooden table and chair for eating. Not that she needs much anyways, she is the only one eating there besides Flora. The place is a little cramped, but that is the sacrifice of living in the city. And it's more to her name than she's ever had. Freya grabs her bag, locks the door behind her, and steps into rhythm with the other working city dwellers. She walks along the cobblestone streets, admiring the small shops nestled in between the towering buildings. The ancient and new blending into each other, and Freya loves it. She hurries along the pathway to her first stop of the day, to the only job that would take her while she completes her studies. As she's about to cross an intersection, Freya feels a distinct tap on her right shoulder. Instinctively, she whips her head to see who it is, to see if it's someone she knows. She's met with a mostly empty street, people milling about not paying her any attention. She continues to glance around, until an unfamiliar red-haired man briskly walks by her and brushes past her, bumping her shoulder in the process. A mild annoyance courses through her, but nothing compared to the annoyance she feels as she walks up to the city's most popular breakfast spot. The spot which she is expected to open by herself because her boss decided not to show up on time. Again, Freya walks past the crowd of increasingly frustrated customers, each of them shooting her a frustrated look. She smiles at each of them as she walks to unlock the door. The tips they give are worth the fake smiling Freya has found. Since her first day, the only staff members have been her and her boss. Everyone else quit under him, and Freya quickly realized why. The man couldn't be punctual even if his life depended on it. But Freya learned to accept it. Sometimes relishing in the extra influx of wages, she'd spend her extra money on new treats for Flora or more history books for her studies. Growing up, she attended the local school that only had the most basic education. But one of the teachers noticed her love of reading, and Freya's deep understanding of a story and quick memorization skills convinced the teacher to give Freya access to her personal library. It wasn't much, but it was more books than Freya ever saw. Most of them were about the tales and lore of the land, while others focused on botany and local herbal medicines. All topics which Freya memorized to the best of her ability, just in case she ever needed them. She hadn't yet. Freya gets through the early morning rush by herself, and then waits, appreciating the slight lull of customers, for her boss to arrive. This is the latest he'd been in yet, and Freya couldn't wait to lord it over him. But as another mid-morning rush comes and goes, Freya can't help but start to worry, wondering if there was an explanation for his absence this morning. After another hour, panic starts to slide up her spine. The thought that something is wrong now on repeat. Just as she's about to close the small shop for the day to check on him, her boss strolls through the narrow door, a bell jingling as he crosses the threshold. The lazy grin on his face makes Freya seethe with irritation, angry that she even worried about him in the first place when clearly nothing was wrong. He passes by her, barely looking at her. His relaxed face instantly makes Freya's question, "Long morning?" and in a bitter edge. He looks like he just noticed she is standing there. "Oh, hi Freya." He pauses a moment. "I swear I tried to get here on time, but I had the most peaceful sleep." He trails off as if part of him is still lingering in whatever dream he had. Freya raises her eyebrows at him, part of her silently praying he doesn't launch into a story about it, something he often enjoys to do. But he picks up here he left off. "And I couldn't wake up until a half hour ago. Then of course I had to get ready and..." That is when Freya starts to tune out, when he goes into a detailed explanation of his morning. And now here I am, he finishes, not even waiting for so much as a reply from Freya before he strides to the back office. It's not like he's much help even when he is around. Freya calls after him. You're letting me leave early today. The only response she gets is a slight chuckle from the back room before the door shuts. Waiting for the lunch rush to start, Freya opens the book she brought in her bag, hoping she'd have time to catch up on her reading before her classes that start in the late afternoon and run well past midnight. She usually gets home just in time to shovel in some dinner, and then fall asleep, waiting to do the same the next day. As she sits at one of the tables, lost in the pages of ancient lore, she hears the jingle announcing a customer. She tears her eyes from the page, and sees a young man with warm red hair staring at her. He stands for a moment in the doorway before walking toward her. Freya quickly shuts her book and stands up, straightening the small apron over her slacks with her hands. A flash of the rude man bumping into her floods her mind as she recognizes him. The earlier rush of annoyance coursing through her again. Can I help you? The words coming out a tad curter than Freya means. The strange man, dressed in a black tunic and emerald slacks that match the same hue of his eyes. A smirk spreads across his face. Oh, I'm not getting anything. His eyes survey the small shop before his eyes return to Freya. He gives her a quick look over, making her cheeks burn. From the mischievous glint in his eyes or her growing impatience? She doesn't know. Then why are you here? Freya responds, her eyebrows arching as she waits for an answer. His smile grows wider with an almost sinister gleam. I was just wondering if you could tell me your name. His eyes settle on hers as he emphasizes the last word. His grin still intact. Strange. This man is strange, there's something not quite right about him. Freya isn't sure what or how to explain it, but all she knows is she doesn't want to give him her name. I don't tell my name to just anyone, Freya says. A warning low in her voice, a dismissal of the conversation. His smile relaxes into a thin line as his eyes study her. Just as she thinks he's about to ask her another question, he says, fair enough, and turns his back to her, sauntering toward the door. Just as he's about to step out the door, he cuts her a glance, his emerald eyes sparkling. See you around, Freya. He cocks his head at her, the wide grin returning. With the jingle and click of the door, he's gone. A hot flash runs through her as he says her name. She quickly walks to the door he just slinked out of her, prepared to ask him exactly how he knows her name, and why, if he does, he asked her about it in the first place. But, as she steps into the bright midday sun, his red hair is nowhere to be seen. After a few scans up and down the street, Freya reluctantly returns inside. She sits down at the table where she left her book. Even though she knew the words on the page would be secondary in her mind to thinking over the conversation she just had. Her boss walks out of the office, surveying the empty cafe. Well, it looks like we're not going to have many more customers, Freya says, giving her boss a pointed look. He gives her a soft smile as he nods his head. I guess I can handle closing up. She unwraps her apron, places her book inside her bag, and takes the tips from her boss's hand. I'll see you tomorrow, Freya says as the door shuts behind her. The sun bright on her face, she heads to her favorite part of the city, the gardens. The one place in town untouched by new buildings and technology. The one place where nature takes precedence over civility. As she walks through the grassy pathway between the hedges and flower beds, she walks by clusters of people taking advantage of the beautiful day. She continues walking, her feet carrying her to the exact spot she's looking for. The one she claims as her own. Reaching her quiet sanctuary hidden amongst sprawling oaks, Freya flattens out on her stomach and digs her elbows into the warm earth. The slightly overgrown grass broken up by a small ring of white mushrooms with brown underbellies sprouting near her. She studies them a moment before pulling out her book and flipping to the folded page where she left off. As she tries to read, her mind continues to be clouded by thoughts of the unnerving man. How he already knew who she was and why he asked in the first place. The more she tries to focus on the words in front of her, the more her mind wanders to him. Giving up on reading, she flips to her back and stares at the wispy sky filtering through the tree branches above her. A bird lands on the oak's branch above her, and for a moment, Freya could swear the bird is staring right at her. As she focuses on the light dancing off the leaves, she notices a soft mist spread around her. Freya's eyes begin to droop, growing heavier with unexplained sleepiness. As they shut, Freya is whisked into a vivid dream where she stares at herself in an extravagant mirror with a foreign language etched around it. Her dark waves cascading over an ornate silver gown. Something about the image makes her eyes bolt open almost as quickly as they shut. Her eyes adjust as she looks around the once sunny garden now covered in inky darkness. Chapter 4. The Fae's Secret. Freya stares at a carving in the wooden dining table of a bellflower. Her eyes trace the outline of it as she processes the information Rory and Lily just gave her. He talked for hours, Lily jumping in to clarify the details of the multiple stories told. It couldn't be true. But they sat in front of her, the mask of their human features gone. Their allure, as they called it. The name comes from the allure's ability to trick humans, Freya assumes. They still look like themselves, but their ears end in sharp points and an iridescent glow highlights their beauty. Both of them are stunning, intimidating Freya enough that she couldn't look at them as her mind reels over their words. Fairies. The logical part of her rejects the word entirely. But she can't deny the proof sitting on either side of her. Both of them perched on the edge of their seats, waiting for her to react. Freya's mind is in the garden, envisioning the thick mist that lulled her to sleep. The unnerving darkness and absolute silence. That was magic. She never stood a chance. She swallows. Both of you are fairies, she states, working up the nerve to ask the question hanging in the room. And you think I'm one too? We don't think we know, Rory says firmly. His playful tone disappeared at the start of his explanation, and it is still lacking. Time moves differently in the Fae realm, but you've been gone a while. His voice is almost sad as he says it. A drastic change from the sarcastic man he was a few hours ago. It seems like he catches the tone in his voice too, and shifts his mouth into a curved smile. Lily pipes up beside her, her hair almost glowing with the allure gone. You have some time to decide. We leave for the realm tomorrow morning. That's not much time to decide, Freya retorts. Well, it's all you've got, Rory snaps back. Unless you want to go home. Another challenge. Everything inside her screams to take the way out. To go home and never think of them, this place, ever again. But something deep inside her resists the urge to run. I'll think about it, Freya responds, surprising both of them and admittedly even herself. She stands up, pushing her chair back as she says, Can I go to bed? Or is there another elaborate story you want to tell me? Lily hops up. I'll walk. I'll take this, Lily, Rory says as he slides a devilish smile toward Freya. I'd rather not, Freya protests, looking to Lily for help. She just gives Freya an apologetic smile and nods at Rory, and then vanishes from the room. Well, so much for that. Freya looks to Rory, her eyes narrowing. Don't try anything magical or otherwise. He gives her a low chuckle. I'll agree to that for tonight only, winking at her. She turns on her heel, not waiting for him to catch up. Of course he does in a swift second, instantly stepping in rhythm with her. They walk in silence and Freya's grateful for it. That is until she notices Rory's wandering eyes on her. I told you to stop doing that, Freya says sharply. He glances at her one time just to get under her skin. If you have something to say, just say it. Well, did you know that we have history with each other? Rory asks while raising his eyebrow. That is the most unbelievable thing you've said tonight. Rory laughs. Maybe I deserve that. Or maybe you're just in denial. I know exactly which one it is, Freya retorts. He stops outside her door, leaning against it, once again blocking her way to solitude. Before we say goodnight, there's some things you need to know. You aren't a prisoner here. He starts. Freya interrupts him. That's a bold statement coming from someone who kidnapped me and then locked me in a room. The amber takes over his eyes as his face grows cold. We needed to get you here to have the chance to explain why. His face softens only slightly. If you want to go home, just say the word. Although I'll admit that none of us want that. I'll leave your door unlocked. Just don't leave the castle and try not to get lost. He opens the door a crack. Oh, and one last thing. There's a surprise waiting for you. His head nods to the door. Freya's eyebrows push together, not sure if it's a surprise she wants. She breezes past Rory, opening the door and stepping into the room. Flora sits curled up on the bed, staring at Freya as if she's been waiting for her. Freya whirls to Rory, her words catching in her throat. He murmurs, "Good night, Freya," while glancing at the fireplace where a slight crackling immediately turns into a cozy fire. He gives her a parting smirk and vanishes, leaving the door gaping open. Freya shuts the door, thankful for the privacy. Freya's legs are tired from pacing for hours. Flora watched her, her head following Freya's movements. Rory's voice, his words repeating in her mind. "You are one of us, Freya. You just haven't been one for a while. We don't know why or how, but years ago something happened between the human and fairy realm, severing the two. And when that happened, you vanished with no explanation. The day the link broke, the ability to travel to the human realm became nearly impossible. We had to wait for hundreds of years before figuring out how to travel to you. To save you. Taken us too long. We didn't know what state you would be in, but we didn't expect human. Whoever did this. They did it intentionally. Your immortality seems to remain intact, but all of your essence, your memories, your powers, we think we can get them back, and that's why we want you to come with us. Plus, we don't know who destroyed the link between the realms. But we can assume it's the same fairy that sent you to the human realm, and a life of eternal mundanity. The story seems preposterous, and yet since the encounter in the garden, there has been a stir inside of her. As if a part of her is coming back to life and tugging at the words they spoke. She argued that her life isn't mundane, explaining how she was making a life for herself, one that she wanted. She thinks of Rory's answer. Ah yes, the life of living through books and others' adventures. You now have the choice to live it instead of reading about it. Freya crawls into bed. Flora snuggles up beside her and Freya is thankful for the familiar comfort. Exhaustion from the fear and confusion of the night claims her, and she closes her eyes. She dreams of Lily, Rory, and a shadow with glowing amethyst eyes. The former two radiating and smiling at her. But they begin to dim as the shadows take over, covering Freya in a familiar inky darkness that thickens the air. As the eyes appear mere inches from her, Freya wakes up. The back of her neck is covered in a cold sweat. Freya walks to the bathroom, splashing cool water on her face and neck until she calms down. She blocks out the vision of the eyes, the intensity in them as the darkness circled her. She shudders, coming to the conclusion that going back to sleep is out of the question. And he did say she could explore the castle. She pulls on a robe that Lily must have placed in her room, along with matching slippers. She winces as the door loudly creaks open. Pausing, she listens for any sound indicating someone coming to check on her. Silence. She tiptoes out of her door, and secretly appreciates the lighted sconces that line the hallway, like he's inviting her to explore. Choosing to turn left, Freya sticks to the side in case of anyone else is roaming at night. Lily assured her that the four of them, including the man she has yet to be introduced to, were the only ones there. Freya hopes she's telling the truth. Turning down another hallway, Freya keeps track of her pathway back to her room. Massive paintings line the never-ending hallway, each one crowned in golden and jeweled frames. She studies each one, scanning them for more information on the Fae realm. Most of them are filled with enchanted forests, woodlands, and lagoons. Beautiful landscapes, but no answers. Freya's step falters as her eyes lock onto a romantic painting of two lovers in a scenic garden, a massive castle behind them. The colors are soft, echoing the tenderness as the two look lovingly into each other's eyes, as if they're the only two that exist. Freya's insides turn to ice as she studies the faces of the lovers. The brunette girl with a soft smile and the strapping redhead beaming down at her. Both of them she instantly recognizes. It's a painting of her and Rory. She glances up and down the hallway, feeling like it's a trick, or a test. This snapshot of them couldn't be real. The painting of Freya looks subtly different than she does, with the fairy-like features of pointed ears and glowing beauty like the others. Rory looks exactly the same, his dark shirt slightly unlaced, tousled red hair, and a wide grin on his face. Somehow his smile looks softer, and happier. Hushed voices from the other end of the hall pulls Freya out of her trance. The deep male voices seem oblivious to her being there, but she recognizes both of them. One belonging to Rory and the other as the man that urged Rory to hurry in the garden. To hurry and grab Freya. She presses herself to the wall, wondering if they can sense her presence. She strains to hear their voices. You can't just ask her, Rory. Not after what she's been through, the stranger says. It's the only way to protect her, Rory demands with sharp anger in his voice. Not just from who cursed her, but from the realm. You know all too well the price of breaking an oath. Silence follows that statement. Freya inclines her head further, waiting for the other man to respond. Let's talk about this later. I believe we have company, the other one says. Freya freezes, they have sensed her. Not waiting for a confrontation, Freya slips away, trying to make her footsteps as quiet as possible while taking each turn she kept track of back to her room. Safely inside, she shuts the door tight, clicking the latch in place and locking it from the inside. She lays in bed, waiting to hear a knock at the door any moment. An interrogation of what she heard. But as the night goes on and the fire crackles, Freya drifts into unconsciousness. Chapter 5 Into the Realm. Freya stirs from a knock at the door, opening her eyes from her exhaustion as Lily calls out, "It's me. I have breakfast." She doesn't wait for a reply as she tries the latch, finding it locked. It seems like these people fairies don't have much respect for boundaries. Still, Freya pushes herself out of the comfortable bed and opens the door. Lily greets with her a warm smile and a tray full ripe berries, elegant pastries and unfamiliar nuts. A cup of black liquid steams in front of her, and the enticing scent of coffee wafts from it. Freya gives her a small, thankful smile as she plucks the mug off of the tray. Lily walks to the table in front of the fireplace, placing the rest of the food on it, and plops down in one of the oversized chairs. She starts picking idly at the food while sipping a glass of bubbling liquid. Freya glances around the room, still shrouded in the darkness of night. I thought it was morning? Lily swallows a bite of fruit. Technically it is. But where we are doesn't have sunlight. And where is that? They didn't cover this in last night's conversation, only hinting at a space between the two realms. We're in between the realms. This is where the portal that connects them. It's been shut for a long time, so it took some effort cleaning this place up for you, she responds, a friendly smile resting on her lips. Why go through all the trouble? Freya says, a bite in her voice that Lily brushes over. We told you, Freya, you're important to us. To each of us. We weren't going to let you disappear from our lives that easily, Lily says. It'll be easier for you when your memories return. That's something we've been working on too. A hopeful glint in her eyes. After they finish breakfast, Lily rushes Freya into getting ready. She still hasn't said her answer out loud, whether she'll join them of her own free will or not. Deep down, Freya knows the answer. She's just not willing to accept it yet. Freya ties the last string of the dress, one with similar white linen underdress as the night before. The main difference being the sage bodice that cuts in at her waist and then flows to the floor. She buckles the cherry leather belt around her waist that Lily hands her, giving her a look of approval. Freya can't fight the smile that tugs at her lips in response. Flora jumps from the bed, flicking her tail in circles. She struts to the door and Freya announces, I guess it's time to go. They walk through the dim hallways. Freya watches as Flora walks slightly ahead of Lily, almost guiding them. How does my cat know where to go? Freya asks Lily. She laughs. Well, she's been here enough times. Freya raises an eyebrow at her, urging for a further explanation. She's your familiar. And it seems like she's been keeping an eye on you ever since you left the realm. When you vanished and then we couldn't find her. We thought you were. She stops herself, unable to say the word out loud. Freya says it for her. You thought I was dead. Lily nods her head. How do you know I wasn't? She gives her a smile. We didn't. Not until Flora slipped through the portal years ago. That was enough confirmation we needed. And after that we started searching for a way to cross over too. We had tried to follow her the first time, but Familiar's magic is different from ours. And with her owner linked to the human and fae realm, she was able to use the portals. That's how we knew where to find you, and that you were safe. Freya eyes her chunky cat skeptically. Well, that answers what she's been up to every time she leaped out her window. They reach the same room they were in last night, the arched doors slightly ajar. Freya feels the nerves rise inside of her, her palms clamming at the anticipation. Lily arches an eyebrow at her. Ready? It takes everything in Freya to hold back the strong no at her lips. Instead, she grinds her teeth and pushes the doors open. The first thing her eyes lock onto are glowing amethyst eyes covered slightly by midnight hair. He has no allure in place, and a misty glow surrounds him. His beauty overwhelms her, and she quickly flicks her eyes away. Don't get distracted. Freya adjusts herself, putting on a facade of confidence and apathy. She looks to Rory, who is studying her from one of the wooden chairs. His eyes quickly meet hers, a playful smile on his lips. Good morning, Freya. I take it you slept well. His tone tests her, luring her to bring up her late-night stroll through the castle. Not really, considering the situation that both of you, she glares between the two handsome men, put me in. The dark-haired one hasn't even said a word, not even a flicker expression on his face. Rory smirks. You'll forgive us eventually. Freya snorts at the notion. She juts her chin to the mysterious man, who has yet to introduce herself. And what's your name? His expression doesn't change and in a cool tone says, It's been a long time, Freya. My name's Merlin. Merlin, Rory, Lily. The people fairies she reminds herself that ripped her from her life. The ones offering her a new one, a more dangerous one. She knows her decision. They stand in a cold room, the chill making Freya wrap her arms around herself. Although it doesn't seem to bother them. In front of them, a solid wall of stone with a circular wreath of branches, leaves, moss and drooping flowers large enough for a singular person to walk through. For the first time, Rory seems antsy as his eyes intently stare at the portal. It should be any moment now, he breathes. As the last word escapes his mouth, a pearly haze appears in the middle of the circle, pulsating as it begins to consume the circle, the haze thickening into a milky curtain of silvery specks that call out to her. A rush fills Freya. Rory looks at her, his emerald eyes burning. We don't have much time before it closes. Freya, this is your last chance. Once it closes, you won't be able to come back. They all wait, the tension tangible in the air. Freya looks at each of their faces. Even Merlin's apathetic expression has a tinge of emotion. I'll go, she says, making her voice hard. But I want to be clear. No lies. No tricks. And, she stares at Rory and then Merlin, never use magic on me again. They hold her gaze before looking at each other, a silent conversation in their eyes. A grin spreads across Rory's face. We'll agree, as long as you agree to the terms as well. She nods. Deal. A truce, however thin, settles between them. The dense mist of the portal wraps around them, and Lily walks through first. Turning her head to smile, Flora quickly follows behind. Merlin then steps through, lazy in his approach. Just Rory and her are left, the mist lacing around Freya as she nears the threshold. A deep whisper lingers in her ear as she steps through and the portal envelopes her. I won't let anyone hurt you. It feels like all of her senses drain from her in that one short step, and then suddenly rush back to her, stronger than before, as her footsteps on solid ground. The wispy tendrils of the portal delicately guide her. She takes a few steps toward Lily and Merlin, noticing the softness of the earth under her feet. Mere seconds later, Rory pops out of the portal. As soon as both of his feet hit the ground, the portal folds in on itself and then vanishes in thin air. Rory saunters to her, placing an arm around her shoulder. She quickly brushes it off and he chuckles. Impressive, right? Freya takes in the ethereal meadow. The limitless green swallows her up, making her feel small amongst the towering oaks and willow trees swaying in the soft summer breeze. A welcome change to the drafty castle that she was just in. The sun reflects off the vegetation, clusters of mushrooms and knee-high flower beds, amplifying the vivid colors, more magnificent than the gardens back home. Home, she thinks. Place she might never see again. She pushes the thought out of her mind. She realizes they're all waiting for an answer. Even Flora cocks her head at her. Freya looks around, then points her gaze toward Rory. I've seen better. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of being impressed. I thought you agreed not to lie, Rory challenges her. Who says I am? Freya responds. He eyes her and Lily chimes in. Enough bickering between the two of you. Let's head to Anwen. She looks to Freya. The main city of the realm. There's a few things we have to cover first, Rory says. His devilish grin on Freya, and she braces herself for whatever he's about to say. You need a disguise. Merlin, will you do the honors? Merlin nods, his face still in a mask of apathy. Unreadable. His eyes fall upon her and Freya feels her skin pricking as a light amethyst glow blooms around her. If she reaches out, she could touch it. But Freya keeps her hand at her side, too mesmerized by the sensation that brushes her cheeks and tingles her ears. That's better, Rory says. Freya touches her ears, feeling a phantom of the elvish ears they donned. Her eyes widen and Merlin speaks for the first time since he introduced her. It's an allure, so that the other fairies won't recognize you. You still look the same to us. And yourself. Why do I need it? Freya asks. Merlin's glowing eyes narrow. We don't know who cursed you to the human realm, and we don't want them finding out we brought you back. Protection for her or them, Freya isn't sure. Secondly, Rory says, as if Merlin didn't just say an ominous threat. Freya, I've asked you before, and I'll ask you again. He bends a knee, a playful smile countered with the seriousness in his voice. Will you marry me? And before you answer, know that it's in your best interest. The realm isn't kind to those who break an oath. Her mind recoils to the conversation she overheard in the corridor of the castle. They talked about an oath. She didn't realize this is what they were referring to. I never made an oath, Freya says, fully prepared to reject his offer. He stays on his knee. Well, actually you did. Before you disappeared. You tricked me. We don't need to get into the semantics of it, Rory says. Rage flows freely through Freya, her cheeks pink at his offer, and the stares of Merlin and Lily. No, Freya says through gritted teeth. I, the person I am now, didn't make that promise. Rory casually stands up, his lips in a straight line but a twinkle still in his eye. Let's hope the realm thinks this. Chapter 6. The Forest's Edge. Rory takes the lead through the forest, Flora quick on the back of his heels. Merlin is a fraction behind them, and Lily walks with Freya. Still seething over the remarks Rory made, the question he asked her, the arrogance that comes so naturally to him, as if he thought she would say yes. Freya glances at Lily. Did you know he was going to ask me that? A guilty look overwhelms her face. She did. Don't get mad, okay? I knew you would say no. But I also know why he had to bring it up. Although, he could have been a bit more subtle about it. They certainly know how to get under her skin. A part of her kicks herself for agreeing to go with them, for being trapped in this strange world. Even as she thinks that, Freya feels the revitalizing energy of the woodland. Ivy wraps around the massive tree trunks. Red and pink toadstools carve out the small trail they walk along now. Rory offered to carry Freya, explaining how if they moved at their full speed, they could be there almost instantaneously. Naturally, she declined his offer, and they began their hike through the untamed forest. She wonders the last time they traveled at a human pace. Most likely never. As they walk, Freya hears a soft humming sound coming from the tree hollows. Flickering luminescent lights cast an enchanting glow. Merlin doesn't turn around as he says, "Those are sprites. Small creatures but powerful." "What do they do?" Freya asks. She only has an inkling of the fey powers they have. "They help control nature in the realm, making sure there's balance between the different magics," he responds in the same drawl as before. As if the conversation bores him, Freya keeps her questions to a minimum after that as they continue to walk. Her legs feel heavier with every step. Maybe walking wasn't the best idea, but it's too late for her to admit that now. They continue a ways, Freya now noticing the buzzing of sprites growing stronger around her. "We're almost there," Lily announces, as if she knows Freya's legs are about to give out at any moment. As she says that, the ground crests and a stone staircase leads to the top of a hill. They look ancient, worn down with weathering of the elements. Rory takes a step, and the others follow, Freya being the last one. She trudges to the top where the others wait. The view itself is enough to make Freya's knees buckle. Her eyes take in the village that circles around the castle that looms on top of a mountain. She isn't sure where the cliffside ends and the castle begins. Bungalows web between the trees and ground, interconnecting pathways between each other. Rory steps beside her, the mischievous grin back. He knows this is something to behold. His arm extends in front of him, pointing to the castle. "That's where we're going. My offer still stands to travel faster. Unless you want to climb the steps by yourself." "Fine, but I'd rather go with someone else," Freya says, referring to Lily. She doesn't want to be in the iron arms of Rory again. Instead, Merlin volunteers, stepping toward her. His face is still undecipherable. Freya lets out a sigh, nestles Flora safely under one of her arms, and then clasps his outstretched hand. He wraps one of his arms under her legs, pulling her close to him. The other grips her waist, his hand on her rib cage. Before she can say anything, they're flying. Or it feels more like gliding. His feet barely touch the earth as the cottages and trees whip past her and the wind is sharp on her cheeks. She grasps Merlin as the speed overwhelms her and she closes her eyes. In an instant, they stop at the outer wall of the gilded castle. It takes a moment for her to climb out of Merlin's arms, the ground feeling unsteady. They must have been invisible to any onlookers at the rate they went. She thinks about how much quicker they would have arrived if she accepted Rory's offer in the first place. She looks at him, his face upward at the castle and his floppy hair windblown. No, the walk was worth it. As if he can feel her state, Rory turns to them. Intently he says, "Remember, no one can know about Freya. Only Aaron does. And even I don't like that." Freya mentally notes the name, wondering who he is. Certainly, she'll find out soon if he's the only other fairy who knows the truth of her identity. The outer gate opens like they have been expecting their arrival. They walk toward it, but Freya pauses a moment, her neck craning to the highest turrets and back to the now open pathway to the intimidating entrance. "Does it ever get boring?" "Immortality?" she asks. The question seems to catch them off guard, none of them answering right away. Rory walks to here, so close that his muscled arms brush against hers. He tilts his head down to her. "That, Freya, is exactly why we have to keep things interesting." He walks forward and then turns on his heel, walking backward, beckoning for Freya and the other three to follow. Flora sits idly by Freya's feet, waiting for her to make a move. Slowly, Freya's feet move in front of her, leading her to an unknown future. They stand in the massive entryway, gold accents glitter on the crimson halls, similar to that of the castle in the inn between. That one must have been modeled after this one, as it's only a fraction of the size. Rory looks around the empty foyer. "It's a bit extravagant for my taste, but I've heard the king is a narcissist." Freya muffles an incredulous laugh. And you're not. He slides a sly smile her way. Only when I have to be. Freya crashes onto the soft bed, once again enjoying a moment of solitude. After entering the castle, Merlin claimed that he had responsibilities he needed to attend to elsewhere. Freya easily picked up on his desire to leave the melodrama of her getting accustomed to the new surroundings. Surprisingly, Rory also excused himself, asking Lily to show Freya to her room before he vanished. Freya had a million questions for Lily, but her exhaustion took over as they climbed winding stairs made of oak branches. Lily chatted the whole way, telling her of how they've preserved her room as best they could while Freya's been gone, making her wonder exactly how long she's been out of their lives. She tried to ask Lily why her room was in the castle, why she and all of them lived there. But she only gave vague reasoning, mentioning it having something to do with their roles in the realm. The room is more snug than the one in the in-between, mainly because of the tree sprouting from the floorboard and disappearing through the ceiling. No amount of reasoning could explain how it's possible. The farthest wall is covered in windows, facing the sprawling gardens where other fairies roamed about. The bed leans against the windows, an ivory canopy draped around it with vines and white flowers that look like snowdrops. The vision of nature embedded in her room calms her. As she sinks further into the cozy bed, Flora is already dozing next to her. Her mind clouds with sleep even as Rory's parting words echo. Rest up and be ready for dinner. Aaron will most likely want to talk to you. Again the mention of Aaron, coupled with Rory's remark about the king earlier. Freya wonders if they're the same person. But she doesn't want to think about this now, not with sleep seducing her. Freya wakes up abruptly from fast, rapid knocks at the door. She jumps out of bed to quiet the ruckus, her mind still partly asleep. She cracks the door open, and groans as she sees Rory leaning with his arms crossed against the doorframe. You're a deep sleeper, I've been knocking for a while. I thought I was going to have to break the door down, he says. His face is playful, his eyes tease her. Freya slams the door on him. His laugh rumbles from behind the door, and it springs open despite Freya's pushback. She retreats into the room, giving Rory a wide berth. He strides into the room, sitting down on her bed. He leans back, his arms flexing as he interlaces his hands behind his head. Dinner's almost ready. If you want to change, there's dresses in there. His head nods to the ornate armoire in the corner of her room. Freya purses her lips as she walks to it, opening one of the doors to reveal that it is indeed stuffed dresses. They're fancier, more elegant, than the one she's in now. Freya eyes a long-sleeved midnight blue gown. Rory follows her gaze and says, "That'd be a good choice. What are you doing here?" Freya says as she shuts the wardrobe and turns to him. She cringes as Flora snuggles next to him and he absent-mindedly pets her. "Usually Lily would be here to help you get ready, but I selflessly volunteered." "That sacrifice must have been difficult for you," Fry bites back. Rory touches a hand to his heart, feigning hurt. "It was, but for you it's worth it." "It's time to wrap this conversation up," Freya decides. "If me getting ready is so urgent you can leave," Freya says. He eases himself out of her bed and lazily walks toward her, his chest leveling at the top of her head as he stands a foot away from her. If that's what you want." Freya shifts, trying to assert that she's not his plaything. He continues, "I also wanted to cover a few rules for tonight. First, try not to talk to anyone. We don't need your identity discovered on the first night." Freya starts to stand up for herself, to say she knows how to take care of herself, but he doesn't give her the chance. "Unfortunately, that means you can't come as my date, as that would be too obvious." This time Freya interjects, "I would never want to be your date anyways." "So callous for a human." He shakes his head at her, clicking his tongue at her. "That's why, Merlin will be the one accompanying you." "Why do I have to accompany anyone?" Even as Freya says this, her heart skips as she thinks of the bewitching amethyst eyes that put her to sleep in a second. "Because we can't just have a brand new fae at the head table with no explanation. If you're with me it would be easier for people to find out. But if you're with Merlin then we can say he met you at one of the other villages," he says in a commanding tone. "Plus, if you're with Merlin, no one will ask you questions." "Why wouldn't they ask me questions?" Freya asks. His other words also catch in her mind, head table. "If you haven't noticed, Merlin isn't the warmest person to talk to," Rory says as if it's the most brilliant plan he's ever had. For once, Freya accepts his confidence despite the qualms running through her. He gives her one last smirk and drifts to the open doorway. "See you soon, Freya." Chapter 7, The Crimson Feast. Freya ends up picking out a soft lilac gown, the simple neckline accentuated with off-the-shoulder sleeves. She loops half of her wavy brown locks into a hair ring made of golden vines, sticking the matching gold pin in place. She freshens up her face with makeup she finds in the adjoining bathroom's vanity. Unsure if she's supposed to meet at the dining hall or if one of them will retrieve her, Freya decides to wait 10 minutes before leaving her room. Feeling anxious, she perches on the side of her bed to keep from pacing. The nerves increase as she hears a light tap on the door, the complete opposite of Rory's bold approach. She undoes the latch, which was locked since Rory left, and opens the door. Merlin stands idly, his hands in the pocket of his black slacks, his loose shirt tucked in. The purple in it is so dark that it matches his jet black hair, only revealing the color if the light hits it just right. She waits for him to say something, even a small greeting. He gives a quick glance over, his expression the same as before. Undecipherable. "Shall we go?" he says, a slight arch in his dark eyebrow. She nods, shutting the door behind her, and they travel through the labyrinth of the castle. Even the hallways seem enchanted, most of them gaping with tall ceilings and windows that display gardens and sparkling lagoons in full view. The setting sun rests low to the ground, giving an orange-gold tint to the landscape. Edges of the mountain interlace with the sage walls. Bright lanterns hang in between the lush flora that lines the corridors as they make their way upward through the castle. They climb a winding staircase made of unfinished wooden branches in silence. As Freya passes over the last step, she hears laughter. The sound comes from an open entryway with pillars made of carved branches. The smell of food floats out of the dining hall, calling out to Freya's empty stomach. Stepping forward, Freya feels Merlin lightly place his hand on her shoulder. He extends his arm to her, inviting her to lace her elbow with his. She accepts, her breathing slightly faltering as her skin rubs against his soft tunic. "Nervous?" Merlin asks while glancing at her, meeting her eyes. She takes a deep breath and gives him an honest nod before returning her gaze to the packed dining hall. She plasters a polite smile on her face, and his face relaxes into a mix of indifference and calmness. She hopes he can't hear how fast her heart is beating as they step into the lively room together. Immediately they are bombarded with curious eyes. But Rory was right. No one approaches them as they begin a long walk, arm in arm down the center pathway. The head table Freya assumes in front of them. The strange fairies give them their full attention as Freya and Merlin pass before returning to their conversations. She recognizes Fae, the kind that Rory explained they are, including Freya. Their powers correlate with their eyes. Elemental, alchemy, and healing. He hinted at a fourth color, but didn't give an introduction to the powers associated with it. Sprites, the small lightning creatures she saw in the forest, flit around the room. Their entire bodies, wings included, are smaller than her hand. An unfamiliar type mingles with the others, their appearance similar to the Fae, but they have more nimble features, including being half the size of the Fae. The wide eyes accenting their face with soft blue irises. Merlin pulls her along as she studies the room. Her eyes roam over the outlandish fruits and vegetables that cover the extended wooden dinner tables. The hoard of food is only outnumbered by oddly shaped decanters that line the table. Freya's nose scrunches as she recognizes the scarlet liquid that made her head spin. Merlin leads her to the two open seats in between Lily and Rory at the center table that looks down upon the court. Freya wonders if the placement is intentional. She opts for the seat next to Lily, and Merlin settles in by her side. Freya examines the other Fae at the table. On her side, it's the three of them. Next to Rory sits a slightly older man with auburn hair and straight nose. Light freckles cover his cheeks, resembling Rory's. On the other side of him sit three men. Two of them look the same age as the stranger, but the third is older with silver streaks in his hair. Still glancing at the opposite end of the table, the man slides his eyes to lock on Freya's. A renewed edge of fear runs up her spine as she stares into his burning crimson eyes. His mouth curves into a frown, and Freya breaks eye contact. She quickly adjusts in her chair, but she swears she can still feel his lingering gaze burning holes in her. She makes a mental note to ask one of them who he is, and why he seems so angry. But now's not the time. Trying to distract herself from her nerves, Freya turns to Lily, whose attention is elsewhere. Or, more specifically, 3 tables away. Following her gaze, Freya spies a tall Fae with tousled blonde hair and bright green eyes. His wide smile matches the warm, golden glow around him. Freya nudges her, glances between the two, and raises her eyebrows at Lily, to which Lily hastily adjusts herself, and gives an innocent look of aloofness to Freya. Giving her a quizzical smile, Freya asks, "What's his name?" Lily's plump lips shift into a haughty pout. "I don't know who you're talking about." "Hate to break it to you, but you're not as subtle as you think," Freya states. The same could be said for Rory. A splinter of annoyance shines through Lily's feigned innocence. His name is Daniel, okay? Her voice barely a whisper as her eyes flit to the angelic blonde. I might have a slight thing for him, but I haven't talked to him yet, if you must know. For someone who claimed we were best friends once, you sure like to keep secrets, Freya says, egging her on. Secretly, she's grateful for a conversation she's familiar with, and for one where she's not the one being interrogated. We are best friends, Lily quickly snaps. Her face relaxes at Freya's surprised expression. At least, I would like to be. Her eyes roam to Daniel. I'm not the best at this kind of stuff. I don't believe that for a second, Freya says. With her doe-like eyes and loose curls, Lily's the most beautiful woman she's ever seen. Plus, she seems to be able to handle Rory and Merlin with ease. I guess I just haven't done it in a while, flirting and all that. I was married. And now I'm not, and I have no clue how to start the process all over again. Her frustration rises with each word. Before Freya can control her curiosity, she softly asks, "What happened?" "He died." The words hang in the air between them, and a wave of empathy courses through Freya. She searches for the right words. Comforting has never been a skill of hers. But Lily continues, her voice lighter. "It happened a long time ago. It's just strange to have similar feelings for someone else." Freya offers an understanding smile. "I'm sure he would want you to be happy." "Oh, I know he would." She stirs her glass of wine. "It would just be another reminder that he's really gone. A new person won't change what the two of you had." This Lily smiles. The light returns to her sapphire eyes. "The same could be said for the two of you." Her eyes dance between Freya and Rory. "I don't think we asked. Were you with anyone in the human world?" Freya's cheeks steam. Yes, she's dated other people. But marriage? Love? She's never felt intensely enough about anyone to go down that road. And she knows the current prospect Lily's referring to isn't going to solve that. At Freya's lack of a response, Lily chirps, "Look who's keeping secrets now." Freya rolls her eyes at her but still smiles. She can understand why her and Lily were friends. The intense chatter from the dining hall hushes into complete silence as the man next to Rory stands up. His face is hard and steadfast, a clear symbol of power and control, as he looks at the waiting crowd. All of their elvish faces and glowing eyes point toward the head table. Freya's insides twist at the exposed feeling. The towering man seems to relish in it, his lips curving into a domineering grin. His deep, gravelly voice fills the hall as he holds up a golden chalice. "Tonight, we celebrate." Everyone in the dining hall lifts their glass, and Freya follows suit. "Midsummer is almost here, and my son has returned from the outer villages with his aides." His garnet eyes turn to the four of them, the fairy's eyes shifting with his. "And it seems Merlin has brought along a new companion. Cheers." He takes a sip of his wine, his flaming eyes still on Freya as he tilts the chalice back. She stares back as she takes a long sip of hers. This time he breaks the gaze and she immediately spits the wine back in the glass. This isn't the time or place for her to lose her senses. She pushes the glass away from her, resting her hands on the wide timber table, grounding herself. The hall erupts back into its previous ramshackleness as the man returns to his seat. Freya tilts her head to Lily and whispers, "That's Rory's dad?" She now understands where Rory gets his pride from, but even he seems kinder than this man. And that's saying a lot. Lily's lips press on each other, forming a tight line as she nods. "That's Aaron. He can be intense." "That's one way to put it," Freya mutters. The pieces start to pull together, forming a realization that Freya wishes wasn't true. Rory's mention of a king, the respect given to Aaron, their places at the head table. Merlin shifts in his seat next to her, joining their conversation with passive indifference. Aaron is the king of the realm. Which makes Rory the prince of the realm? Freya can hardly get the words out. "Precisely," Merlin responds. "We are all indebted to his father, so in return, we serve him and the realm as demands." "Why him?" Freya asks. "That," Merlin says as he reaches for the food in front of him, "is for another time." Freya swears his eyes flash with a controlled bitterness. Lily starts to pile food on her plate too, already indulging in the wine in front of her. Freya looks around the array of platters, attempting to choose what to eat. The unfamiliarity of the textures and colors of the dishes intimidates her. As she's about to ask Lily what she should eat, a light tap lands on her shoulder. Rory's mischievous voice taunts her. "Need help filling your plate?" Freya twists in her chair and snaps. "I know how to put food on my plate." He smugly grins as he reaches around her, deliberately choosing the food he puts on her plate. "Thank me later." He winks at her and saunters back to his place beside Merlin. Freya waits until he's not looking to take a bite, cursing him even as she clears her plate. All of it being undeniably delicious. Chapter 8. A Moonlit Dance. So Freya, did your dinner satisfy you? Rory murmurs in her ear as he slides next to her. It only took him a few seconds to peel himself from the web of dancing fairies when he saw her watching from the side wall. Alone. Apparently, a tradition of the court of Anwen is to finish every night with a dance. The moment the feast died down, the tables and chairs disappeared with a blinding red flash. Only the wine decanters were left as celestial music from an unknown source pumped through the massive hall. The already tipsy fairies began ebbing and flowing with the music. Lily quickly joined them, winding her way through the crowd, stopping a hairline away from Daniel. She was carefree in her nimble and elegant dancing, easily meshing with the other ethereal dancers. Freya was content to admire the spectacle from afar. Freya ignores Rory's question as she purposefully studies the swaying fairies. He leans against the wall, his arm brushing hers as he crosses them, an excuse to flex his muscles under the taut fabric of his shirt. He tilts his head toward hers. His red hair falls in front of his gleaming eyes. You know, if you're waiting to ask me to dance, now's your chance. That's the last thing I would like to do, Freya asserts, angling her body toward him and crossing her own arms, ready for a standoff that he indulges. Their bodies are inches from each other, and Freya has to refrain from taking a step back. She holds her head higher as he studies her face. What about a trade? He raises an eyebrow at her. One dance for one question. I think I'm good, Freya says in a steely tone. Really? Because your friend seems to be preoccupied and so does your companion, the last word dripping in sarcasm. His head points in Merlin's direction, who's in an intense conversation with Aaron in one of the corners of the hall. How about no dance and you still answer all of my questions? Freya counters. Oh, the dance is not coming off the table, Rory grins. Seems we're at a stalemate, Freya says with narrowed eyes. Seems we are. They both hold their ground, waiting for the other to cave. One dance, Freya eventually says, just to get him to stop staring at her. And you answer all my questions during it. His smug grin makes her instantly regret her decision. To her surprise, Rory leads her away from the dance floor. He walks her to a curved door made of white birch tree and opens it, allowing her to walk through first, and Freya's breath catches as she looks at the scene around her. This is my favorite place in the castle, Rory says as he lets the door shut and she looks around. The music is still audible but noticeably fainter. Cool breeze whips around her as she looks up at the night sky littered with stars. A crescent moon casting a glow over the balcony. High above the village below, an unruly garden forms a circle around the terrace, leaving a pocket large enough for two people to glance over the edge. Distracted by the beauty, Freya is pulled back to reality when she feels a large, calloused hand wrap around her waist. Rory twists her to face him, and then reaches for her free hand. They stand there a moment, both feeling each other's closeness. Freya stiffens a bit, and Rory begins dancing to the music floating from inside. She stares at his chest, which meets directly at her eye line as she asks her first question. Why didn't you tell me your dad is the king? Well, I didn't want that to be the only reason you liked me. She doesn't have to see it to know he's smirking. I'm serious, Rory. No lies, no tricks, remember. He glances down at her, and she looks up at him. The truth is he's someone I don't particularly like to be associated with. But, you're here in court with him, that must count for something? Freya starts, a tad surprised at his honesty. I'm here because I want to be. That doesn't mean I like the way he does things. He adds, it's one of the reasons I brought you here, and he knows it. Oh, so that's why he glared at me throughout dinner? No, that's his usual greeting. He was actually very well behaved tonight. I hope you never see him when he isn't. Freya doesn't either. He doesn't seem like the best dad, Freya states. Rory laughs at this. Well, after a few hundred years he stops feeling like your dad, and more like someone you have to take orders from, and in this case I do. And so does everyone else. What types of orders does he give? It depends on who they're for. In the realm, everyone contributes in one way or another. There are other leaders, but even then Aaron has final say. His hand tightens on her waist. Their dancing has turned into smaller movements. Freya feels the intimacy of the situation. Thinking of a lighter topic, she asks about the nimble fairies she saw earlier. Those would be pixies. Make sure to ask Lily about them, Rory smiles. Freya tilts her eyes away from his, looking back into the midnight garden. Her mind replays his answers as she tries to rummage between the old questions and new ones forming. She almost doesn't notice when the music ends, and it seems like he doesn't either. Or at least won't be the first one to say it. Freya pulls away from him. There's your dance. He smiles. And there are your answers. The door from the hall opens, streaming light on them. Merlin stands casually in the doorframe. If he had any thoughts of the two of them alone, his face doesn't show it. Erin's ready for her. Rory nods and Merlin offers his arm to Freya. His small attempt at keeping up their cover as the three of them wade through the fairies still partying. As they pass, Freya feels a twinge of jealousy at their ability to be utterly carefree. Their ability to escape their worry and fear. Instead, Freya is walking straight into hers. They exit the dining hall, where Merlin drops Freya's arm. The sounds of laughter growing fainter as they continue to walk through the dimly lit corridor. Rory is unusually silent the whole way. The three of them reach a cherrywood door with 2 lit candles on either side, the wax dripping down the side of the candelabras. Without a knock, Rory pushes the door open. Erin sits behind a tall desk, the walls surrounding the room built into the mountain, and candles line the room. The warmth accentuating Erin's disdain as he looks at Freya before his eyes settle on Rory. They stick near the entryway, and for the first time Freya is truly grateful for being in the company of both Merlin and Rory. Erin gets up from his chair, crossing in front of the desk to face them. He stands even taller than Rory, his boiling red eyes a stark contrast to the unsettling mask of calmness on his face. The calm cracks as he growls, "Why is she here?" He still looks to Rory, not her, for an answer. "You know why," Rory bites back. "She's not worth it. She's not worth disrupting the peace over," he says, taking a few steps closer to them as he speaks. Rory adjusts his stance, his left shoulder guarding Freya. His emerald eyes glaze with heat, but Merlin speaks calmly. "What's done is done, Erin. She can't go back even if we tried." Freya almost forgot about that factor. Erin flippantly asks, "Does she even want to be here?" It takes Freya a moment to realize he's waiting to respond. She bites her tongue to keep her from replying, "Do you have to be such an ass?" Instead she asks, "Why does my being here concern you?" From the incredulous look he gives her, maybe she should have gone with the first option. She senses both Merlin and Rory tense next to her. "I am in charge of everything that happens in this realm, lest you forget," Erin retorts. "You being here only causes more danger for my entire court." A small voice in the back of Freya's head warns her to not ask about the danger. "Don't talk to her like that." Rory seethes a low warning. Erin breathes out. "Make sure no one finds out who she is. If they do, she is no longer under my protection." His gaze turns to her. Freya raises her chin, not backing down. "I don't need your protection." Now she's angry too. She feels a firm hand grip her shoulder, Merlin's. He doesn't look at her, his violet eyes on Erin. "There's no need for threats, Erin." Merlin's voice is steady, unwavering. Erin simply turns his back on them, walking back to his desk and sitting down. Apparently they're dismissed. Merlin keeps his hand on her as he steers her out the way they came. Rory follows behind and shuts the door hard enough that it shakes. She can feel the shift in attitude of both Rory and Merlin, and she wonders if they can feel it in her too. Freya is furious, and for the first time since walking through the portal, she lets herself feel it. Her hands curl into fists and she stops walking. Takes a moment for the two males to notice. They turn around, Rory's face a steely blanket of anger, and Merlin's has a slightly perplexed look, as if he's not sure he cares to hear why Freya stopped walking. "Why did you bring me here?" Freya demands. The questions that have burning inside her spill over. "Why bring me to a place where everyone would rather me be gone? What is this danger that everyone keeps talking about, but never explains?" Her eyes cut at Rory. "Why wait to bring up an oath I supposedly made hundreds of years ago? What is the point?" She watches as Rory's face softens, his anger dissipating. Merlin's stoic mask falters for just a second. She wonders which will answer her, what excuse and reasoning they'll use. She's not sure there is an answer. Freya doesn't even know what she wants to hear. Rory's tense face slackens and takes a step toward her. "Does there have to be a point to want you back?" Chapter 9, Midsummer's Promise. Rory's reply cracks a fissure in Freya's tightly guarded walls. Not just the ones built over the past 2 days, but the deep-seated loneliness she's felt over the course of her life. At least the curse on her, the banishment from hundreds of years ago from the realm, explains her lack of support in her life. Being taken from her friends, her family, her lover. The last one sticks in her throat. She feels as if a new energy blossoms in her gut. An assurance. The lost part of her reaching out, asking Freya to trust them, to listen to them and fight for herself. causing an overwhelming urge to regain her memories, her powers, and her life that had been so easily ripped from her. I'm going to need a better answer than that, Freya responds despite the new feeling surging inside her. She tries to make her face stern, but it seems even Rory notices her walls chipping away. Maybe I'll give you one that lives up to your standards one day, Rory says as his face relaxes into an easy smile. Even Merlin's cool exterior seems to relax as Freya walks in between them, and they follow behind her back to the dining hall. Waking up the next morning, Freya is thankful for the first night of dreamless sleep. She rolls over in the massive bed, facing Flora who's still snoozing. Freya takes the chance to study her. She looks so innocent. Her familiar. A creeping thought comes to mind. Flora has been guarding her, watching her throughout her human lives. Before going to bed, Lily explained Freya's cycle of humanity. While her fairy essence was locked away, her immortality remained, causing a constant cycle of rebirth and new life. Freya hopes those memories remain hidden. She can hardly swallow the thought of her fairy thoughts returning. The threat of her sense of self altering, especially since that Freya, the Fae Freya, is still a distant stranger to her. Still under the sheets, Freya hears a creak of the floorboards outside. The door bursts open, Freya cursing herself for forgetting to lock it, and Rory leans there. His eyes are even more fiery today, the removed allure accentuating his glinting red hair. A forest green linen shirt open to the middle of his chest, showing off his sculpted muscles. What do you want? Freya demands. Her feet land on the cool stone floor. She remembers she only has on a thin nightgown and wraps a silky robe hanging off her canopy bed around her. I came to check on you, he smirks, confidently walking into the room. He props himself against the bedpost, nonchalantly crossing his arms. She steps away from him, opting to stand near the impossible tree sprouting in the corner. Subtlety isn't one of your strong suits, Freya observes. Really? He frowns, pondering her accusation. I don't think it's one of yours either. Freya scowls. She wonders how they had ever been together without ripping each other's heads off. The portrait of them from the in-between floods her mind. Their easy smiles. The newfound energy stirs inside her, trying to reach out to him. She pushes it down, repressing the unfamiliar longing. Not him, it can't be him. You still didn't answer my question. And while we're at it, why do you think you can just stroll into my room whenever you please? Freya asks, annoyed at his constant invasion of privacy. Please, you don't need to get worked up about it. He seems to relish getting under skin. I came to tell you that breakfast is ready. Oh, does everyone get drunk and dance at this too? He chuckles. No, breakfast is pretty tame. But, there is something else I would like to discuss. Freya knows what it is before he says it. The oath. He continues. The moment you entered the realm, the oath was restored. There is a small grace period before any punishment. His expression grows darker. We don't need to get married right away, but the intention needs to be there. Punishment by the realm. The world she's in seems to have a life of its own. And a temper problem. How harsh of a punishment could it be, Freya wonders, and would it be worth it to say no? She has to find out, weigh her options. Whatever the punishment is would be better than marrying you, Freya says, even though the tug inside of her says otherwise. His eyes turn to stone, he strides toward her, making her back against the massive oak. Freya, his voice icy, the punishment is death. Even immortals can be killed. Freya's blood runs cold. Does it not count that I'm different? That I'm not the same person that made the oath all those years ago? She says quietly. His face softens, but she looks at him, her eyes pleading with him for another way out. Death or an eternity with Rory. His voice is gentle with her. I didn't want it to happen this way either, Freya. He draws closer to her. He reaches out a hand as if he's going to brush her cheek. The realm doesn't care about the details, only that the oath is carried out. Freya tries to make sense of it. What part of her was so sure, so confident in a life with Rory that she would make an oath that could lead to a death sentence? For the first time, she notices the sadness behind his playfulness. How he must feel for her to have forgotten, to reject him. How her sudden disappearance affected him. His wife to be gone without any explanation. She meets his gaze. I don't have an answer for you. Not one that would satisfy him. His eyes roam over her face, studying her. You don't have to, not right now at least. This time his hand grazes her cheek and she doesn't pull away. The grace period lasts a while longer. Until the midsummer celebration in 3 days. I won't bring it up again until then. His intense eyes stare into hers, he's so close to her. His calloused hand cups her cheek. She jumps as the bedroom door swings open. He turns to the door, dropping his hand. Lily walks in, clearly noting the tension in the room between them. With a surprised grin, she looks between them and says, "Wow, well this feels like old times." Freya shoots her a warning glance as she moves around Rory, distancing herself from their conversation. The impending threat is still in her mind. 3 days. He sure does love to put her on a short deadline. Just making an observation, Freya, Lily teases defensively. I'm assuming Merlin's growing impatient? Rory leisurely asks as he strolls to her, his spirit back in his step. I believe his exact words were, "What is taking them so long? I told Rory to bring her an hour ago." So yes, I would say he's a little impatient, Lily responds. Her demeanor matches her description of Merlin. Freya's surprised Merlin showed much emotion at all. He's always so quiet when she's around. Freya wonders how he became friends with Lily and Rory, the two most spirited people she's ever met. Rory muses before stepping outside the room. I'll meet you downstairs. Freya, I suggest you get ready quickly, unless you want to be the one to face Merlin's wrath. He gives her a wink as he turns, the door shutting behind him. Freya now draws her attention to Lily, who lounges on her bed. Flora sits comfortably in her lap, purring as Lily pets her. It's the first day of trying to return your memories. Right. Her memories that unlock who did this to her in her past life. She's not sure if she wants to see it, remember all of it. There are even memories in her short human like she wishes could be forgotten. A small internal part of her is excited at the adventure replacing her carefully thought out life she had in the human realm, the one filled with repetition. Now she has no idea what the day holds. She hates to admit she's starting to enjoy the thrill of it. Lily and Freya descend the staircase leading to the foyer. Freya chose a loose pair of sage slacks and a short-sleeved tunic that crops at the hem of her pants. An airy change to the fitted dresses. Rory idly stands at the bottom of the staircase, lost in thought before glancing up at both of them. His warm smile greets them, as his eyes roam over Freya. She cuts him a glance and he looks away, surely remembering how she scolded him for his wandering eyes. Lily practically skips next to him, her eyes bright with hope. Freya feels intimidated at her cheerfulness. She doesn't know how she'll react to her memories returning. They seem to have high expectations of her, confidence that she'll become her old self again. Freya feels slightly suffocated by the pressure, the enormity of it. But still, she joins them as they walk through the towering front doors of the castle, and into the wild garden. They walk on a worn trail, the only indication that life other than the vegetation has visited the enchanting garden. Bright flowers bloom around her and toadstools litter the pathway. The tall trees curve toward each other, creating a canopy that shelters them from the bright sun. The light streaming through the pockets of leaves, dancing off the shades of green. They leave the garden, entering the forest that sits precariously on its edge, the fauna easily flowing into the never-ending trees. She hears the telltale hum of sprites whizzing about. Magical energy exudes from the nature around her. She wonders how much it comes from the realm. As they walk, the grass brushes against Freya's ankles. Closed flower buds open slightly. An earthly connection flows through Freya, so strong that she almost trips over a root. The crack buried inside widens a fraction. Rory glances at her, and then to the reactive nature around her. It seems the plants have taken a liking to you, Rory says. I can't say I blame them. Don't you ever get tired of yourself? Freya asks, her voice light. Lily snorts at that. I haven't yet, Rory retorts. They continue to walk, and as Freya's about to ask how much farther, watches as Rory and Lily vanish in front of her. She pauses a moment, panic striking her. They wouldn't leave her defenseless in the woods. She runs to where they were standing moments ago. The summer light warps around her as she takes another step, and it feels like her body is engulfed in a dense mist. Then Freya sees it. A small cottage nestled in between two oaks, the enormity of the trees swallowing it up. Protection spell, she realizes. Rory and Lily smile at her, beckoning her to the door of the bungalow. Are you ready for this? Rory asks, his eyebrow arched. Freya doesn't offer an answer. She doesn't have one. And yet, she walks through the threshold, meeting Merlin's amethyst gaze that has been waiting. Chapter 10. Kiss of Winter. The cottage is only one room. The ceilings curve into each other with shelves lining the entirety of the walls. Vials of colorful liquids, ranging in texture, cover the shelving, accompanied with dried flowers, snaking vines, and jars of unrecognizable items suspended in translucent purple liquid. She doesn't have the courage to ask what's in them. The cramped room feels even smaller with the four of them packed in it. Merlin and Rory taking up a sizable amount of space. Merlin stands by his desk littered with parchment, His dark curls pushed out of his face and strands hang below his ears. His face half illuminated by the melting candles casting shadows around the room. A stark contrast to the summer day outside. "Glad you guys could make it," he says in a cool tone, an impatient edge to it. Rory smiles at him, patting him on the shoulder. "We got a little distracted." Merlin stares at him a beat and his shoulders slacken, the tension evading. Freya wonders how Merlin has put up with Rory all these years. "So my memories," Freya starts. "How do I get them back?" "I've been working on the potion since you arrived," Merlin says casually. Freya's face shows her surprise. Since she met him, he hasn't hidden his apathy toward her. She didn't expect him to be the one to have the solution for her memories. He holds up a skinny vial, filled with swirling glittering azure liquid. Freya's mouth dries at the sight of it. Now that it's in front of her, adrenaline, and maybe a tinge of excitement travels through her. "Has anyone ever done this before?" Freya asks, giving a pointed look to the daunting potion. "We've never needed it before," Merlin says. That's enough of an answer to increase Freya's heartbeat. Before she can lose her nerve, Freya takes a step to Merlin. "I'll guess we'll find out if it works." He nods, a silent understanding between the two of them. This could go terribly. But the tethered string inside her pulls her toward the vial. He hands it to her, and she hears Lily inhale a quick breath, the anticipation and nerves radiating off of her. Even Rory's eyebrows are furrowed with concern. Her only option is trust. Trusting that this won't harm her, mentally or physically. That it works and that they can begin to solve the questions around her disappearance. Trusting fairies. What a ridiculous notion. And yet, Freya's hand stretched out toward the vial. The liquid almost whispers to her, like it already possesses her secrets. She gives one last glance to Rory, wondering how this will affect their relationship. How it'll affect her feelings toward him. She looks at the vial, her unknown future swirling inside. She touches the glass to her lips, tilting it back and swallowing it whole. The taste almost makes her gag, but she grits her teeth. The silky liquid travels down her throat, stinging one the way down. She's about to mention the bitter metallic taste. But her vision blurs. The muffled voice of Rory is the last thing she hears as she descends into darkness. She separates from her body, feeling strangely free. She wades through the castle gardens she just left. Except now, the magnificent trees have bare branches and a blanket of snow rests on the ground. Looking around, Freya hears a familiar voice, Rory's. Too distant to make out the exact words. She hears a second voice. Instantly she recognizes it. It's hers. Quickly, Freya winds through the hedges toward the voices. She stops at the sight of them. Her Freya looks different. Her smile stretches across her cheeks as she laughs again with Rory. His eyes crinkle as he stares at her. They share a tender, intimate kiss. Freya's eyebrow twitches at the sight, a slight burning in her chest. This is what they were like. They were happy. She takes another step toward them, and the darkness returns, closing in on itself. It feels like Freya is floating in an abyss, and then she's back in the cottage. She sees Merlin, but he doesn't look at her. She realizes it's because she's still in the otherworldly state. His attention focused on Freya standing in front of him. This time, her past self looks familiar as she fumes at Merlin. They seem to be fighting with each other. Merlin's face is urgent as he tries to reason with Freya. But she's not having it. Her face is a scowl. The Freya watching the memory is surprised by Merlin's fierce emotion in his eyes and voice. She walks to them, they don't even look her way. A ghost in her memory. Then clear as day, Merlin says. "Consider it, Freya, just for a moment." Quieter he adds. "You've known for a while how I feel about you. You can't keep avoiding me." "Merlin, I'm getting married soon," she emphasized the word. "I don't have time to think about this, I can't." "I know to break the oath, Freya," Merlin interrupts. His piercing eyes like daggers digging into her soul. His intensity mirrored by the dark purple mist forming around him. "I know how to break the oath, Freya. Just think about it for 1 second." "I don't need to think about it," Freya snaps at him. "I don't want it to be broken." As Freya storms out the door, the vision starts to fade, pulling Freya into the vapid darkness. A pulsating throb begins to course through Freya's mind, strong enough that she winces from the pain. She feels the sea of darkness clutch her and pull her deeper and deeper. Brief visions of memories flash in front of her. She fights to keep her eyes open. If there's any information about the one who did this to her, how to get her powers back. An ancient oak tree stretches out in front of her. Full branches droop, brushing the earth, and the white bark gleams in the sunlight. Power radiates from it, and Freya can feel it even through the vision. It calls out to her, the essence of it reaching out to her through the vision. Before Freya can reach back, she snaps back into her body, the throbbing headache now tenfold. Her eyes snap open, and she sees a hazy blue glow around her. Lily leans over Freya, her brows furrowed in concentration with her hands placed on either side of her head. Her eyes widen when she notices that Freya's awake. You're awake. Stay still, I'm almost done, Lily says. Freya listens to her command and the pain in her mind starts to dissolve until it vanishes completely. The blue glow from Lily's hands fades with it. She smiles triumphantly. Feel better? Yes, thank you, Freya says quietly. Her thoughts scrambled from everything she witnessed. Her eyes scan for Merlin, but she's distracted by the unfamiliar room. The room was similar to the size of her own, but there's no tree, no plants. The jade green walls have faded paintings patterned on it, only broken up by the polished wooden furniture and wide-mouthed fireplace, which has a slight crackle to it. The floor-length window reveals the dim light of twilight. Rory and Merlin are both sitting in the plum chairs near the fire. They stand as Freya stirs. Rory quickly goes to her side. He looks drained, the slyness from earlier in the day replaced with worry. Merlin hangs back, staring at her with guarded interest. Where am I? Freya asks, sitting up in the colossal bed. Rory gives her a half-hearted smile. You're in my bed. She sits further up, glancing around the room. Rory's room again. She tries to get out of bed, but the floor spins as she tries to stand on her feet. Rory catches her, helping her lay back on the bed. Lily raises a slight eyebrow at the gesture, and Freya bats his hand away. I'm fine really. Just dizzy, Freya insists. She looks back to Merlin, the memory of him fresh in her mind. She had no idea, no inkling of how he felt about her. He wanted to break the oath, and he had a way to achieve it. Maybe he'd be willing to do it again. A faint whisper dances in Freya's mind, similar to the one she heard in her confrontation with Aaron. We need to talk. She now recognizes the voice. It belongs to Merlin. She looks at him, trying to mask her surprise. Her skin pricks of the thought of him in her mind. She wonders if he can read it, if he already knows what she saw in her memories. Freya gives him a slight nod. If he knows of a way to break the oath, Rory must too. And he didn't offer her a way out. Instead he insisted the only other option is death. At that moment she knows this secret. This memory will stay between her and Merlin, at least until she has more answers. Did you remember anything? Lily asks, breaking Freya out of her trance. Merlin's voice floats through her mind, his voice deep and commanding. Don't tell her, Freya. She doesn't look at him this time as she answers Lily's question, explaining the sensation of falling into the subconscious of her mind, the chill of walking through the winter garden and seeing the brief exchange between her and Rory. At that part of her explanation, Rory seemed pleased. She describes the oak, skipping over the memory that happened in the cottage, centuries ago. All three of their faces perk in interest as she details the pull she felt toward it. Well, it seems like we have our starting place, Rory says, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips.